St. Catherine's, a monastery in the heart of the mountains of Egypt's Sinai Peninsula. The call to Vespers. Like a small Christian island in an Islamic sea, this old Greek Orthodox monastery is situated at the foot of Jabal Musa, the biblical Mount Horeb where God spoke to the people and gave Moses the tables of testimony, the 10 Commandments, which the furious prophet smashed to bits when the people of Israel danced around the golden calf.
It is a holy place, respected by the 3 major monotheistic religions. It became holy because this was the place where God spoke to his people and to mankind for the very first time through his servant Moses.
The prophet Elijah is said to have lived here in isolation for several decades. Hundreds of hermits followed his example in the early centuries of Christianity.
The Sinai Mountains considered to be God's because he walked here and spoke here. And was once told to me by a bishop, a Greek bishop, that the capitals of the world, we know where they are, but God's capital on the earth has to be Sinai because this is where he wrote his commandments. It was in the 4th century that St. Helen commissioned a chapel to be built here to glorify the miracle of the burning bush, which is recorded in the book of Exodus. This is the miracle that occurred when Moses was here and just shortly before his departure to see Pharaoh to free the Israelites from the Pharaoh's hands. The site of the burning bush is extremely holy. This is where God's voice told Moses, "Cover your head, take off your sandals, because you stand on holy ground." Moses, in his humility, obeyed the word of God. And at that obedience, flames emerged from the bush, yet they did not consume it. This was the symbol of the Old Testament for the coming of the Mother of God. And of course, with that holy incident, this was also the coming of Christ. It's Rubus Sanctus. It has 3 leaves, symbolizing the Holy Trinity. It has flowers which shrivel up at the top, usually in spring and summer. It bears no fruit. And these are the symbols that the Mother of God was a virgin and remained a virgin after the birth of Christ. And this is why many iconographers of the early church have depicted the Mother of God within the bush holding the Christ child, and at other times with the burning bush depicted in her vestments. The roots of the burning bush still grow from this original site where the miracle occurred. After it was cut and preserved, it sprang up, and the bush now grows outside, and the roots grow from this point.
Moses and the burning bush, the 10 Commandments. Many biblical events have made this a holy site, but the monastery derives its name from an early Christian martyr, St. Catherine. When she died, angels carried her body to the highest peak, St. Catherine's Mount, where it was found by monks, undamaged and unmarked by the ravages of time. This sarcophagus next to the altar is said to contain her remains. St. Catherine's holiness contributed to the monastery's reputation as one of the most important Christian places of pilgrimage, even when Islam took over from the Byzantine Empire in the 7th century. By order of the new rulers, a small mosque was built within the high monastery walls, but the monks have always considered themselves to be protected under a special privilege granted by the Prophet Muhammad himself. Whether real or not, it has helped preserve the monastery through the ages in this place of extraordinary sanctity.
Πολλοί επισκέπτες έρχονται εδώ.
A lot of visitors come to this place, and even if they're not religious, they admit sensing something special, like a special gift, touching their heart. That is true. And when they climb up the holy mountain where God handed down his laws, they feel this religious presence even more strongly.
Επιτρέψτε μου να έχω εμπειρίες κι εγώ.
I've had the same personal and spiritual experiences myself. Other people who visited the area said, it is not just nature, the light, the sun, the earth, the barren rocks. It is indeed a gift. A long time ago, they called it the mountain where God trod, where he walked. Is it possible that he dwelt on the mountain for 40 days without leaving his gift? Later, the prophet Elijah also came to Mount Horeb. This was another mystical experience the prophet had with the Holy Trinity. The Holy Ghost has a slight breeze, a different divine presence. And also all the holy people who came here and added their own spiritual struggle to this presence, the tears of their atonement, the sweat of their brow, the fasting, the exertion, and the blood of the people who were killed here. They all made their contribution to God's gift through the ages.
Διαφόρους που έχουν εδώ σφαγιαστεί. Και έβαλαν λοιπόν και αυτοί μέσα στους αιώνας ο καθένας μια μικρή χάρη πάνω στη χάρη. Και πέραν από αυτά.
And here, in this central monastery and a few annexes surrounding it, throughout this mountainous region called the Sinai, lived recluses who worshipped God.
Ορεινή έκταση του Σινά, όπου υπήρχαν μοναχοί ερημίτες και δοξολογούσαν τον Θεό και έκαναν τη Θεία Λειτουργία.
They celebrated the Holy Liturgy in the presence of God and the angels. They drank the blood of Christ. They also brought relics from other places to worship them and left their sacred remains behind. All these experiences constantly add to the spiritual treasury called Sinai.
Αυτή όλη η εμπειρία είναι μια συνεχής κατάθεσης πνευματική σε μια τράπεζα πνευματική που λέγεται Σινά. Κατέθεταν συνεχώς.
We could also mention the holy works of art. The icons are certainly unique, not only because of their aesthetic and artistic value, but also because of their sacred value, originating from souls that are passionate about God, made after prayer or fasting. These are like an open book telling the entire history, the entire holy history, detailing the lives of saints or describing theological themes.
These are the oldest icons in the collection. This first one depicts St. Peter, the Apostle of Christ, and he's holding the keys in his right hand. This is an icon of the Mother of God and the Christ child, St. Theodore on the left, St. George on the right, with the angels behind them. This is an icon considered to be the masterpiece in the monastery's collection of Christ the Pantocrator. You can see on the left a kind expression, on the right a severe one.
This breathtaking 6th century painting has been the prototype of Christ's portrayal to this very day. Often made in spiritual ecstasy after weeks of fasting, the icons were not meant to be viewed in broad daylight. Rather, the faint light of a candle enhances their mystical power. With its thousands of paintings, St. Catherine's holds one of the most valuable icon collections in the world, which does entail certain dangers.
Είναι λοιπόν όλα αυτά και συγχρόνως.
All of these icons and paintings, but also other holy objects such as manuscripts, are not merely museum pieces to us. We can never agree with a mentality that reduces a monastery to the status of just a museum.
Μια τέτοια νοοτροπία, το μοναστήρι να είναι ένα μουσείο. Είναι μεν και με μουσιακή.
Of course, icons and manuscripts have a historical, even archaeological importance, but their true value lies in our hearts. In the old days, the fathers gave up their very lives to protect and preserve such irreplaceable treasures. And we, in our turn, stand ready to sacrifice our lives and protect their spiritual worth.
Γίνονται αυτά πνευματικές αξίες.
We're now at the site of Jethro's well, and this is the water that the maiden Zipporah drew for Moses for his livestock, and for her good acts, he chose Zipporah for his wife. It's also said too that those who drink of this water and who aren't married, marry after drinking it.
I missed that, but I got y'all.
Μεταξύ, μέσα στους αιώνας.
Through the ages, there have been many dangers, many raids by different tribes, but we have survived everything. Despite all the trials and tribulations the monks have suffered, monastic life in the Sinai, and particularly in this monastery, continues to exist without interruption.
Έμεινε συνεχής μέχρι σήμερα. Μεταξύ των πιο δυσκόλων περιόδων.
One of the greatest difficulties we are facing now is the arrival of modernism and tourism. We try to solve this problem by keeping a tight rein on it to ensure that there is a balance between visits by pilgrims, the life of the monks, the life of the Bedouins, and the protection of the natural and religious environments.
Της ζωής των Βεδουίνων και της προστασίας του φυσικού και ιερού περιβάλλοντος.
Δεν είναι τυχαία το ότι ο Θεός φανερώθηκε εδώ στην έρημο.
It is no coincidence that God showed himself to Moses on Mount Horeb, here in the desert. It is quiet here, the same quiet surrounding events like the birth of Christ in a manger in Bethlehem, far away from other people.
Δηλαδή, γενικά ο Θεός εξέλεξε τόπους ησυχαστικούς.
God generally chose calm and peaceful ways to manifest himself to the people and enter into a personal relationship with them. Tranquility helps people become peaceful and serene themselves. People nowadays have lost the peace in their soul because they live in cities and because of technology, machines, the sounds and the noise. But progress can never take away our inner peace.
Παρόλα αυτά δεν μας την παίρνουν. Και εξάλλου ο
The noise from the outside world will harm neither monks nor other Christians who have found peace and quiet in their hearts. There is also love, the task of love, which says that if a Christian has to give something to his brethren, he will need to sacrifice his peace. This is what the Church Fathers dictated, that even when you are praying and someone knocks on your door, you will have to open it.
Tourist or the pilgrim or the visitor are always welcome. As God's children, they have the right to be here too. As God's servants, we believe we don't own this, and we don't even call it our monastery, we call it God's, which is the reason why we open our doors daily to anybody who wants to come. Through need of rest and through need of other chores, we must close the gates certain hours and certain days of the year.
If there is one place in the monastery where the monks are anxious about visitors, it is the library. Over the past 150 years, visitors and scientists on educational trips have cut the most exquisite illuminations from books and misappropriated a great many manuscripts. This piece of film is unique because the library is usually off limits to visitors. With its 4,500 precious books, it is the world's second largest manuscript library after the Vatican. The biggest loss was the theft of the Codex Sinaiticus, the oldest known Bible, stemming from the 3rd century. Over 100 years ago, the scholar Tischendorf borrowed the Codex, solemnly promising to return it. His letter still enrages the monks, because Tischendorf never showed his face again and sold the Bible to the Tsar of Russia. The Codex now is one of the showpieces of the British Museum. Pleas by the monastery to have their stolen goods returned remain unanswered, even though there was something that eased the pain somewhat.
Accordance with the letter, His Excellency.
23 years ago, after a fire that originated on the other side of the wall, the monks, to their own surprise, discovered 1,100 manuscripts. Not all were as complete as these from the old library, but 1,100 manuscripts is still a lot. You'll understand how touched the monks were when, among the manuscripts, they found 18 missing pages from the lost and stolen codex. They've been carefully conserved as proof of the authenticity and origins of the codex.
Over the centuries, the monastery has seen many ups and downs. Where there were once hundreds of monks, there are currently only 15 to 20 who come from Greek Orthodox monasteries. Still, the situation has much improved from the mid-17th century, when there was only one monk.
These are the skulls and bones of the monks who lived and died here since 6th century until today. The land here is rocky. We can't have a bigger graveyard than the one we have behind in the garden, which can welcome only 6 bodies at a time. So when a 7th dies, he will be buried in the place of the oldest monk, whose bones will be transferred to this room. The other reason, which is more important, is the spiritual, is to help the living, especially monks, to consider that every day in one's life, as the last one could die at any moment and meet God. And that's why we call this room the University of the Monks. They are the teachers and we are the students.
This monastery has existed for almost 17 centuries, which makes it one of the oldest in Christianity. For over 13 centuries, it has held its own amidst a different religion, 13 centuries during which Islam tolerated it in this holy place. Although the situation was precarious at times, the monks always lived in harmony with their surroundings, especially now. A true symbiosis has arisen with the Bedouin tribe living in the area. Members of the tribe work for the monastery, while the monks in turn give them medical assistance in their small clinic, provide them with bread, and even mediate in the event of disputes. It is as if this sacred location will simply not bear conflict.
Εδώ ο τόπος αυτός, η ερώτηση του τόπου.
As we have said, this is a holy place. On the slope of Mount Horeb, Moses received the Ten Commandments. There's so much peace and quiet here, it is hard to imagine any other place like it anywhere in the world.
Κάπου και στην Ελλάδα, στο Άγιον Όρος, θα ακούσεις...
On Athos in Greece, there would at least be the sound of the wind rustling through the trees or the sounds of birds and animals. Many areas around here have perfect silence, not a sound to be heard. But the desert, the wilderness of the region, also helps the monks. Not having any human comfort, they turn to God. God is their only solace.
Και καταφεύγει στο Θεό. Η μόνη παρηγοριά εδώ πέρα του ανθρώπου, του μοναχού, είναι ο Θεός. Όπως λέει ο Αριστοτέλης,
Like Aristotle, the great Greek philosopher, once said, a man who lives alone is either a wild animal or God.
πρέπει να είναι ή άνθρωπος, ή θηρίο, ή Θεός. Βέβαια, ο μοναχός δεν είναι ούτε...
But a monk is neither, of course. He lives his life in anticipation of his meeting with God. He is on his way to becoming one with God. God created man to have a social life. He must be in contact with others. To be a monk does not mean having no contact with anyone. After all, he communicates with God.
Δηλαδή, αυτό που λέει και ένας μεγάλος ασκητής...
And like the great ascetic St. Nilus of Sinai, who lived here, once said, a monk lives separately from everyone, yet is connected with everyone. It seems as if monks initially refused to live with others, not because of hatred, but based on love, on the will to experience this divine love, the divine eros. He refuses everything, but can quietly communicate with the entire world through prayer.
Με την προσευχή πρώτα. Ότι ο μοναχός όταν προχωρεί στην πνευματική ζωή...
If a monk advances in his spiritual life and has cleansed his heart from all passions, he will pray for the entire world, for good and for bad people. He cries and is pained by the condition of the world, and, God willing, he will convey his goodness to the people.